EdTech Mondays Africa is supported by the Mastercard Foundation Centre for Innovative Teaching and Learning and is part of the Mastercard Foundation Young Africa Works programming.
Welcome to this edition of EdTech Mondays Africa, where we're coming to you from the vibrant city of Abuja in Nigeria. And we are at the Mastercard Foundation EdTech Conference 2024 that is themed Education Technology for Resilient and Inclusive Learning in Africa.
Let's take a look at some of the highlights from the conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, a warm good morning to all of you. And let me also, on behalf of the Mastercard Foundation, welcome everyone to this, what we call the inaugural Mastercard Foundation EdTech Conference 2024. The young people in Africa are going to be the largest proportion of the world's workforce. So investing in education in Africa is not only about Africa, but rather it is about investing in human capital for the world.
One of the things we have responsibility for is to get those out of school either back to school or skilled to be able to engage in works. Technology is a very major component of it that we are going to deploy.
We know connectivity can allow that young lady, young man in the village to have the same quality education as you get when you go to MIT or you come to Lagos Business School. We already know that's been proven. It is possible. But the challenge is, how do we ensure that these people are connected and connected affordably?
Government needs to reinvent the narrative around education and then around EdTech. We need to break it down. We need to help people understand and see their own role in making this work intentionally.
I can do this.
Technology will never remove the need for quality teachers. Teachers remain so important. The issue is therefore, how do we use technology to support teacher professional development at scale?
I think it's also important for us to consider an AI footprint. We're in it. We cannot move away from it. We need to embrace it.
And we thank every single person as well for being such great sports. You've made day one truly memorable and impactful.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. We welcome you to day 2 of Mastercard Foundation's EdTech Conference 2024.
The panelists I'm going to introduce you today will be discussing the requirements for a strong digital infrastructure for a sustainable and a strong EdTech ecosystem.
In every conversation we have with ministries of education around EdTech policies, this issue of digital infrastructure and the fact that only 30% of the schools are connected to electricity is the number one issue. And looking at kind of both on-grid and off-grid solutions, the role of solar is essential in this discussion.
EdTech entrepreneurs, those who are actually generating innovation, can do business with the government so that the majority of learners have access to the quality education that they deserve. I think would be a very good thing to actually put in action.
For EdTech specifically, the policy is to have EdTech mainstreamed in the education system because technology is supposed to provide solutions to enhance provision of education services.
At the very systems level, you can look at using AI to make data-driven decisions at the ministerial level, but then as it comes into utilization or implementation, then these frameworks become very important in ensuring that the right learning journeys based on the learning framework that the country has defined is being followed.
Well, my experience has been wonderful. I believe that the panels have been well curated. The speakers have been experts in their fields. We've had a blend of government, private sector, as well as the development sector. So it has been an all-round approach to the conversation. And key for me, it's not just a talk shop. There are key takeaways and key action steps that have been identified from the conversation so far.
It's very key if we are to push the EdTech ecosystem forward. We need to invest in our collaborations and not see each other as competition, but rather as stakeholders that can work together to go somewhere.
At the conference, we spoke to a number of key stakeholders about the current state of EdTech in Africa and what it's going to take for us to transform Africa's education ecosystem enabled by technology. We start with Peter Materu, Chief Program Officer at the Mastercard Foundation.
Thank you so much for joining us, Peter.
Thank you, Joy.
Great. Your key takeaways from the conference?
First, I was really pleased to hear everybody, ministers, edtechpreneurs, young people, teachers, saying that edtech is now a necessity, not a luxury, in order to achieve resilient and inclusive learning in Africa. But the second takeaway, the need for us to all come together. Government, private sector, entrepreneurs in the EdTech community, everyone, development partners, funders, come together, take a system approach to addressing the challenge of inclusive and resilient learning systems.
Right. And speaking of inclusive and resilient learning systems, this does play such a key part in developing the future of work. Africa has a youthful population.
Absolutely.
And we're just trying to figure out how do we strategize around ways of laying the foundation to preparing our young population for the future of work with technology as the base.
Africa is the only region in the world which has a growing population, working age population. And it's going to continue to be like that for pretty much most of this century. Many of the other parts of the world are shrinking. And what it means is this population in Africa, most of whom are young, in many countries, up to 70% of the population are people below 30 years of age. So the question is this population going to be ready to seize the opportunities in Africa and beyond? Or are they going to be ones that will need to be supported over the future? And so the challenge for all of us right now is how can we accelerate the pace of enabling these young people acquire the foundational knowledge and skills that are necessary for them to deliver their full potential. The Human Development Index of Africa right now is 40%, meaning only 4 out of every 10 working age people are capable of delivering at their full potential. How can we go to 60%, 80%? Because that is what is going to drive socioeconomic transformation in the continent. And moving at the pace we are at right now, in school, classroom-based learning, it is important, it should continue, but it is not enough. We need to do things faster. And we know that there's a lot of young people out there who are out of school, out of work. We had at this conference 108 million in Africa and growing. It's the only region in the world where this population is growing. And so we have a lot of work to do to make sure that these young people, the majority of them, if not all of them, differently abled people, young and not so young, that they can acquire the basic minimum knowledge and skills to be effective. And this is where EdTech becomes important, to be able to reach many more. Those who cannot come into the school-based environment, but also to be able to learn at their own pace. Right? And secondly, it is about resilience. We saw during COVID, in-class learning was disrupted, and many young learners could not continue. How can we prepare ourselves so that when the next shock comes, and we know it will come, how can we prepare ourselves so that learning can continue uninterrupted when the next shock comes and the next and the next. It is so important that we double down on our commitment on EdTech to make sure that all hands are on deck to leverage technology to accelerate the pace of enabling young people acquire the knowledge and skills they need to contribute to the growth of their economies.
Right. And, when you talk about doubling down, there are a number of initiatives that the Mastercard Foundation has initiated to play its role in building a youthful population that can live to the true potential of its description, a youth dividend. Tell us about some of those initiatives.
Mastercard Foundation has always believed very strongly in the power of education to transform societies. And as you know, it is one of the two charitable purposes of the foundation, that along with financial inclusion for the poor. Yeah. And so the foundation has been big on this, and particularly focusing on young people and young people in Africa. Our new strategy, Young Africa Works, is all about Africa, all about young people, and not only to support young people to get education, but to transition from schooling and skilling, linking young people to opportunities, and then doing things on the demand side to create new opportunities, because we know that today only 2 to 3 out of 10 are getting wage employment when they finish school.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not enough who are getting into school, but then after they get into school, those who are completing, many of them are not getting wage employment. And so we need to do things on the demand side to make sure that we expand the opportunities for young people either to get wage employment or, by and large, to create their own employment through entrepreneurship. So we are doing things across that. Some of the initiatives that I can mention is, one is the oldest is the Scholars Program,
right,
which is about young people from very, very poor families. And the idea there is that if you take a young person from a very, very poor family, give him or her the opportunity to access quality education, alongside that wrapping around leadership development, leadership for self and leading others, that individual can then become the engine for transformation in that family, in that community, and eventually contribute to socio-economic transformation in his or her space or country. And that program has been running for over 10 years, 12 years now, and we have over 40,000 scholarships that have been offered for secondary and tertiary, and growing. We are planning to go to 100,000 the next few years. But in addition, we have a number of other programs. We have the Leaders in Teaching program, which is a program that aims to strengthen the quality of teaching and learning. It's about the teachers, either pre-service or in-service teachers, but it's also about the leaders of education and about motivating teachers so that they are interested, they're committed in the work that they do. And that program has been running since 2018. We started in Rwanda, Ghana, and now we're scaling to many other countries in Africa. We also have big programs with some of our partners, focus on girls, because we know that young women are the ones that are most disadvantaged in this whole journey. When we talk about 108 million that are out of school, more than half of those are young women. And so we are deliberately prioritizing young women. And across all our programs, we have set a target of at least 70% of those we touch are young women. And in education, we're working with partners like Comfort to take young girls from early secondary, accompany them through secondary education with leadership development and entrepreneurship all built in, and life skills and reproductive health, so that at the end of the day, they emerge not only as young people, 12 years of education, which is very important for young women for many, many reasons, but also that they are ready to fly, meaning they're ready either to go to further education or they are ready to become entrepreneurs.
Right.
Yeah, but they are also ready to take care of themselves and their families through the life skills and reproductive health skills and knowledge that they get.
Right.
Yeah.
That's actually very interesting because when you tie that to the human capital index that you talked about, it sort of pieces everything together. And the fact that you lean heavily towards the use of technology
how do we ensure that no one is left behind in the movement of technology and how it can be used to transform? Because we are seeing that while technology is an enabler, it's not exactly reaching the hard to reach the under-resourced communities. How do we make it touch even those lives at that level?
Well, you are very right, Joy. If left alone, without being intentional about how we engage or we integrate technology into learning, technology can become actually an agent for creating an even larger gap. So it's about intentionality. Developing solutions that are, from the beginning, taking into account the needs and the context of the poorest. And this is not only about the content, it's also about infrastructure and working with governments to ensure that infrastructure goes beyond the tarmac and reaches the rural, but also the methods. It doesn't all have to be internet-based. It can also be what they call asynchronous learning, so that people who do not have access to the internet can access content offline and have occasional contacts with online or internet-enabled environments. So it is about intentionality. We are not yet there. I think there is a lot that needs to be done in that space. But I was really excited to see in the conversation during this conference and also the ministerial forum that there is this awareness and the resolve exists among particularly on the part of government and also the EdTechpreneurs, the entrepreneurs who are developing solutions, that they see this need. So I'm hopeful that as we go, it will happen. But we all need to keep an eye on that. Intentionality is very important.
Intentionality. Well, thank you so much, Peter, for speaking to us on this edition of EdTech Mondays. We do appreciate the time you've taken.
Thank you, Joy.
To talk to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and look forward to further conversations on this topic.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The inaugural Mastercard Foundation EdTech Conference 2024 brings together stakeholders from over 20 countries to deliberate on the current state of EdTech in Africa and also to look into some of the solutions, the innovations that would best work for African learners across the African continent. What do the data policies look like? What is the infrastructure like on the African continent? But also, what are some of those EdTech solutions that are coming out of the African continent that can work for learners in Africa?
I really do think that EdTech has started solving issues in Africa, and it has really democratized access to a lot of young people and kids across the continent, and in terms of reach, in terms of having creative ways to reach different people with different backgrounds. So I really do think that because of EdTech, a lot of people have been able to get access to education.
EdTech has solved gaps in education sector, such as personalized learning. I kind of like that aspect because through personalized learning, we students are able to focus more on our strengths and weaknesses, especially in terms of the gamification that is used in EdTech.
Most of Africa's young people who live in underserved, under-resourced communities are the most excluded from access to education. How are we ensuring that we are bringing them into the conversation and giving them access to education so they can also earn the right path to dignified and fulfilling work? How are we adapting technology in our education systems to cater to those who need it the most?
So there was one of my teachers that she was kind of like the first person that started using EdTech in my school. And so one of the ways she tried to encourage students was by using our own personal gadgets for students to have access to this. So how I feel, and ever since, other teachers have been trying to, copy her, to emulate her by also doing the same to help other students as well.
We have to be adaptive, and with the growth of reach of connectivity, with the materials becoming really cheap, I think we're expanding and we're becoming more adaptive to that. And with the rise of, AI and all these tools that are available, I think it's going to be much easier to be more adaptive to current circumstances, especially in the EdTech scene.
The fact that the transformation needs to start from the educators themselves as well as the learners, that will definitely allow for a further push when it comes to using the technology, utilizing the technology, and all the adoption that needs to happen from a perspective of what technology can actually allow you to have, right?
Discussions at the conference focused on the state of EdTech in Africa, assessment of technology-enabled solutions to the continent's educational challenges, data evidence, collaborations, funding, and opportunities to tap into emerging technologies to accelerate the skilling of young people, particularly young women.
Dr. Bosun Tijani, yes, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And it's great to have you make time for this conversation on building an impactful EdTech ecosystem around Africa. Let me start with a basic question around Nigeria, of course, being the most populous country on the continent. What's your assessment of the current state of EdTech in Nigeria and Africa at large, and what direction do you think it needs to go?
I think the context we should always set clear when we're having conversations around technology and its use in sectors like education is the demography that we're a largely youthful continent. 70% of our people on the African continent are under the age of 30. In Nigeria, it's 60% under the age of 25, which means by extension, most of our people are digital natives. They've been given birth to and they're growing up in an era where technology is all around them. They can see it, they can feel it. And if you also take into consideration the investment that has gone into technology over the years, we're not where we desire or where we should be when it comes to investment in technology. Most of our countries have made significant progress. Things like internet, mobile telephony are a lot more ubiquitous, which means many people can find a way to get online. And the implication of that in a world where the way we collect, process, and produce insight and knowledge is already changed significantly thanks to technology. And the other part is the infrastructure that is required on the part of the government to be able to ensure that schools can support these things, ensuring that teachers can actually leverage technology to augment the way they teach and what they do in classroom. There's still significant gaps there as well, because you have a lot of teachers who were trained at a time where technology wasn't a part of how you teach. So there's still a huge gap in getting the teachers to be able to leverage technology to teach.
What would you say would be some of the innovative solutions that we can look into to make sure that technology-enabled learning is reaching the millions of learners in Nigeria who do not have access to education?
If people are truly connected, we can quickly upskill a lot of our teachers to actually learn about new methods of teaching, give them access to content that they can use to augment what they teach in classroom, but also offer some sort of collaboration amongst these teachers as well, almost like building a virtual community of teachers so that they can also share insights and ideas on how they should teach. Because personally, I believe that education is changing significantly because learners now have access to a ton of content. They are distracted. The way they want to learn is changing. And teachers must be trained and empowered to be able to meet up with these learners where they are at the minute.
What kind of policies do we need to make this work?
There's got to be some sort of standard for certifying that solutions actually can lead to the promised learning outcome. Because someone has built something that is technology-based or they've added artificial intelligence into it, doesn't mean that that solution can actually help a learner achieve their goals. In fact, in some cases, some solutions are dangerous to the way people learn. I think on the other hand as well is also the need to help government be able to vet and determine what they should be spending money on. Because we shouldn't also forget that government may not also have the capacity or the know-how to actually be able to choose the right technology solutions. They may know that we need a teacher training platform, but what are the things that should be in a teacher training platform? How do you look at to ensure that the technology solutions you're buying can actually meet what you want it to do? I think that gap is there. So you have a significant gap on the side of the government, on the side of those who are building a thorough understanding of education principles and the science that is behind how you teach and how people learn is missing. So there's a need for policies that can both plug that gap, but also inspire thinkings around how both sides can fix these problems.
We have a young population in Africa, and they are being put out there as the youth dividend and also the future of work, because we are the youngest population in the world. How can we leverage technology to create opportunities for young people across Africa on the global stage?
If you look at the core of most of the challenges that we have across our key sectors, you can summarize them to be a productivity challenge. A lot of our sectors, not just in Nigeria, but in many African countries, are not punching where they should be. They're really not performing. So productivity is a major issue. We're not optimizing in nearly every sector. If you look at agriculture, Africa can actually be feeding the world if we're doing the right things. Perhaps applying science, technology in it, we can be feeding the world. If you think of education, we shouldn't be struggling. We have these young people who are eager to learn if we find really smart, productive ways to teach them. Same for transportation, same for everything. So when you think about that, and you think more, if you go into the economics thinking around Cobb-Douglas production function that says the real way to leapfrog productivity is bring technological innovation into it, then you start to see that though we're youthful, though we have a lot of unemployed people, if we actually prioritize innovation in every of our sectors, you will find that more of our young people can actually lift the continent through their creativity.
Knowing that technology is pretty much dominated by young people, unlike farming, where the average farmer, we're told in Africa, is 60 years old, in technology, the average technology person is probably about 12, and going up. So if we're going to look at the incentives to encourage them to do what they're doing or what they can do best, how are we going about that? Giving them innovative incentives to be able to plug into the benefits of technology.
We've done the work we're doing with AI. We've already funded a significant number of startups focused on agriculture and also education in artificial intelligence. The next strategy we're working on, which is starting in a few weeks, aside from the bill that is going to the National Assembly, is actually on UAV. And we've started talking to some of the top drone manufacturers. So Zipline, for instance, they have significant operations in Nigeria. There's Aseco, which is a French company that is also using drones to map here. We can see the application of drones significantly in the agriculture sector. And we want to encourage more innovations, and not just UAV, sensors and things like that. Because government is investing in that space, we believe that there should be more technology solutions there. And my role is to ensure we can do education on the side of the government, but also then create that ecosystem from the startup side to ensure that more people are also getting involved in that sector and building for it as well.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. Dr. Bosun Tijani, Minister of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy, Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now that we know what the hits and misses are in the EdTech ecosystem, what more can our EdTech or education stakeholders do to build resilient and inclusive learning across the African continent? What do our learning institutions need to do? But also, what kind of policies do we need to implement to make sure that our education systems are making sense to the beneficiaries?
There's a lot of gap in terms of connectivity and infrastructure. So unless we have, those foundational layers, it's really hard to reach people with technology and with education. So I think, different stakeholders, starting from government, NGOs, private sector, have to work together to kind of play our roles. So that's one organization or one stakeholder is not trying to do everything.
You find that the change in the curriculum takes way too long to incorporate the level of innovation that actually young people come up with. And the young people come up with all those innovations based on what they see on the ground, and they believe that there is a way that they will change the way they have learned themselves in the past. It is very important to move forward all together and make sure that we are resilient for the future and we are able to provide what is needed for the future.
They should be able to provide infrastructure facilities in terms of technology, like laptops, systems for students to be able to learn more about using EdTech tools.
Joining us now to talk to us about youth development and the role of technology is Dr. Jamila Bio Ibrahim, Honorable Minister of Youth Development in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us on EdTech Mondays Africa. How important is education in your mandate as you look to make sure that these young people are meeting the expectations of the global workforce, maybe 10, 15, 20 years from now?
We have a department that is committed to education in the Ministry of Youth Development. It's called the Education and Youth Development Department, EYD. So that shows you that education is clearly the foundation for youth development. And for us, we also believe that there are various layers to education, and technology is also a platform that we leverage in order to accelerate our teaching and skilling of young people. Yes, it's important that young people learn and acquire digital skills, not just limited to the digital economy alone, because when we talk about skills and digital skills, most people assume that we only focus on coding, but digital skills actually go beyond coding, and we can leverage that digital platforms to actually teach, skill and upskill young people in various sectors. For us, our priority sectors are the creative economy, the blue economy, a green economy, which is also agriculture, and the extractive sector as well, because like we said earlier during the conference, that it's important that we prepare young people for the economies that are emerging, and then we also need to skill them up to be globally competitive in already existing economies.
The fact that you talked about those 4 key areas of focus, what role does technology play in making sure that this information is cascading down to the young people of Nigeria and helping them to set them on the right path to accessing dignified and fulfilling work?
Technology, like we're all aware, has a very critical role to play in helping us to fast track and then scale. It helps us, it gives us the opportunity to scale whatever interventions we're doing or whatever skilling we're embarking on. We are also very particular about, as a matter of priority, to be very inclusive, because we understand that not all young people in Nigeria have access to the internet. So we are very aware of that, and our programs, initiatives are designed and tailored in such a way that we ensure that we are inclusive, and we devise an approach that ensures we deliver our teachings and our skills programs through pre-recorded media, because we know that people do not have access. Some communities are underserved. We're also wary as well not to leave out or to exclude young people who live in urban slums, because urban slums are devoid of certain opportunities that young people in the urban areas, proper urban areas, in the privileged neighborhoods in urban areas are exposed to, and we tend to exclude them and focus on when we talk about inclusion, we focus more on the rural, young people in rural areas, but forgetting that we have a group as well that lives in urban areas that do not have access to similar, to equal opportunities.
When we talk about policy implementation, can you tell us about some of the policy interventions that your ministry has come up with and is implementing that are technology-driven for the enhancement or transformation of young people's development in Nigeria?
We're about to launch the National Youth Skills Program, and that is focused on skilling young people for entrepreneurship and getting them into jobs as well. Well, I wouldn't say it's a policy as a policy document, but it is an initiative of the Federal Ministry of Youth Development. In addition to that, we have before now had previous initiatives that support and strengthen young people through skills in the digital space. We've already identified certain priority sectors, and we understand the importance of, if we're building entrepreneurs, then we must skill them up. We must build their capacities to be able to run these enterprises in the sectors that we have identified.
And finally, when, say, 10 years from today, what do you think Nigeria's young people should be capable of in terms of their self-actualization?
We want young people in Nigeria in 10 years from now to be not just consumers of technology, but to also be innovators of technology. We also envision in Nigeria 10 years from now to be one that has created enabling policies and that have impacted innovators in the technology space, and of course young people in various priority sectors. And that's why we're laying that foundation today and ensuring that we skill young people in these priority sectors to be not just competitive locally, to also be globally competitive.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us and talking to us about youth development and the role of technology in transforming education in Nigeria. Thank you so much, Dr. Ibrahim, for talking to us.
What are some of those EdTech solutions that are coming out of the African continent that can work for learners in Africa?
Joining us now is the Director, Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning at the Mastercard Foundation, Joseph Nsengimana. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of EdTech Mondays. The EdTech Conference has come to an end, and I would like to hear your thoughts. What have been your highlights from the conference?
Exceeded my expectation. There were quite a lot of people that were able to attend from different countries.
Right.
There were a lot of discussion that took place from various participants. And at the end, the conference was able to actually propose recommendations, which were discussed in the ministerial forum that came after the conference.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the ministers that were present at the ministerial forum they were actually impressed with the recommendation. And from those recommendations, they actually committed to some of those recommendations. They will be implementing them,
right,
so that by 2026, would actually be able to measure the progress that would have taken place.
Speaking of measuring progress, now the conference is done, what next? Especially from the participant side, but also from the action side.
If you look at the participant side, so a lot of them were EdTech fellows.
Mm-hmm.
These are EdTech entrepreneurs from across the continent. I was very impressed the fact that they were actually they were collaborating even before they left the conference.
Right.
So a number of them were already talking about how they can work together across countries, how they can collaborate. So what I'm seeing is that after the conference, we're going to see a lot of collaboration across countries. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that we saw a lot of encouragement, if you will, right? By seeing what other people are doing in different countries, and then noticing that there's something that can tweak their product or their tool. So there were quite a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Especially those who are doing similar work.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually one of the goals of the conference, bringing people together so that they can learn from each other and establish collaborations. So we were able to achieve that from that goal. The second thing is that we wanted the participants themselves to determine the kind of EdTech ecosystem they want for Africa. And then be able to actually, from the discussion, to come up with ways to accomplish that task, ways to achieve that. And I think the recommendation were a result of that collaboration or that discussion. For instance, about the recommendation I mentioned, specifically around the enabling the local EdTech ecosystem, which is one of the recommendations was actually adopted at the Ministerial Forum. We will see how many countries by 2026 would have an actionable EdTech policy, a strategy to go along with it, so that the ecosystem in their country is actually vibrant and growing. So I saw a lot of action that came out of the conference, and I'm eager to see what would actually happen in those countries.
Right. And from a perspective of the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning, how then, considering all these action points, how do we move forward? What are some of the things that we are going to be seeing happening from a center's perspective in trying to foster what we observed and saw at the conference?
One of the recommendations that resonated with a lot of people was the policy component. We have a partnership with the World Bank where we support countries in the formulation of the policy and the strategy. So I see that program growing. I see definitely this program growing and supporting more countries. I see our program with our partnership with ADEA around data, which was another recommendation which was actually adopted or agreed to. We will see that program picking up steam, working with countries to establish the necessary environment, if you will, to be able to collect, analyze, and publish data. So I see that one growing as well. And the third thing that was talked about was out-of-school youth. And people realized that this is it's a waste. We are really missing out on opportunity to support these young people, but also to develop our own countries. So the drain of having so many young people not in school, not employed, and not in training is significant. And so a number of countries indicated that they're going to start working on that particular problem. And this actually aligns with the program that we're currently designing around the resilience of secondary education. And for the next couple of years or so, we'll be looking at how do we implement our program so that we can get about 20 million young people among the 100 to at least complete their secondary education. This is done not by going back to school, but in flexible and varied pathways, working, for example, with community colleges or religious institutions, and doing this in a way that's flexible to accommodate these young people. And so these are some of the things that I see as a way forward for us at the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning.
Right, so tackling the challenge of digital skills and also data evidence. Great. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Joseph, and wishing you all the best until 2026.
3 days of conversations on the state of EdTech in Africa, inclusivity, building resilience, conversations on how to embrace artificial intelligence and also the other emerging technologies in the EdTech space. How can we increase investment in technology-enabled education, inclusivity, how we're building for learners living with disability, and so much more. We have also observed that there are increased innovations on the African continent through our exhibition area here at the Mastercard Foundation EdTech Conference. And so there's so many lessons to take, but also commitments to make until the next conference, which will be happening in 2026. What lessons are we going to carry? What commitments have we made? But also, what priorities have we come up with that need urgent implementation? Thank you all for joining us on this edition of EdTech Mondays Africa. We've been coming to you from the vibrant city of Abuja in Nigeria. And what conversations have we had? Engaging, enriching, but also thought-provoking. Until the next edition, thank you all for watching, and bye-bye for now.